Hey, y'all, this is Ed,
And this is Kara.
and this is your day's dumpster fire. So, how's it going?
Not bad. Not too shabby. Hanging in there.
Yeah,
Living life.
yeah, just vibing. That's what the kids are saying.
Vibing.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
vibing. Yeah, guess that's what the new trend is now, is to vibe. I don't even know what that means.
I say that in my head because I hear it so much because I work with the middle schoolers, but then, when I say it out loud, it just doesn't sound natural.
Yeah, maybe the connotation is different for our generation, but this vibing is, yeah, it just doesn't sit right in my head, and given our professions and the insanity that we go through, vibing is, I would assume, is associated with a positive connotation. Um,
Well,
yeah, when everything
yeah.
is going sideways, it doesn't seem so positive.
That's true.
So yeah, we've got a rather interesting episode today. The last couple of episodes have been very historical in nature, and this one is a little on the historical side, but it's really relevant to today. What we're looking into are these glorious moments where you're the director of some nuclear power plant, and you get a call in the middle of the night, you being told that your plant just exploded. And so a nuclear power plant on the surface is such a is one of the cleanest. I know it doesn't seem like that, but it's one of the most cleanest forms of electricity out there. But yet, when it goes sideways, when these things don't work right, or somebody presses the wrong button at the wrong time, it is the epitome of a dumpster fire. So
it's like the world's sharpest double-edged sword.
Yeah, with like pretty severe broad swings, and it's very unforgiving to whoever's in the way, including yourself if you're going to walk right into that thing. So, but I'm going to have to put you on the spot here. We didn't talk about this before we started the episode, but what's your trash can fire, your friendly fire? What's your contribution for today?
I was not ready for this. Hold on.
Oh, come on. You got to have something.
I'm trying to think. That's how boring my life is. Okay. I have a very little itty bitty tiny one.
Okay.
I went on a field trip with the middle schoolers to the science center a couple weeks ago, and I was recruiting my brother, who also works at the school with me, to help me chaperone. And the first question he asked me was, "Are they runners? Are they going to leave our site the moment we get there?" And I said, "No, absolutely not. It's going to be fine." We got there, in not 5 minutes, they all spread out into different directions. And I had to pull them all aside in this little room in the science center, surrounded by musical equipment, which may not be the best area for a conversation with 13-year-old boys, and let them know that please don't run off. I am responsible for you. If anything happens to you, I'm in trouble.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's where you tell them, I'm going to feel bad for you for minutes, and then we're moving on.
Yeah, exactly. And then my brother, after this conversation, my brother just looks at me and goes, "They're not runners, huh?"
Yeah, nope.
I overestimated.
Yeah, you had too many positive assumptions on.
I did. I had faith in them, and they crushed it. They crushed it.
There you go. That's a perfectly valid trash can fire right there. So yeah, let's get into it here. So we're talking about nuclear power plants, and it really kind of came to mind because, or this topic came to mind because of a lot of what we are seeing in Ukraine right now. They've got nuclear power plants there. They've got a pretty big one that's, like under siege. And so it seems like whenever we put the term nuclear in front of anything, it can escalate. The sense of importance or the sense of holy crap, like urgency goes way up. So, if you think about a coal power plant, you're thinking of giant plumes of black smoke. If you think a oil power plant, you're thinking maybe giant plumes of slightly bigger plumes of black smoke, kind of a thing. Wind turbines, you're thinking of those giant propeller things outside of LA that you see all the dead birds on the ground.
Yeah, the one in Palm Springs.
Yeah. And there's a lot of other up and coming technologies using like currents of the ocean, launching balloons up in the air with wind turbines on them. And so yeah, I feel like because of nuclear technology, I feel like we've really kind of had to push the boundaries because we are so afraid of these power plants.
I mean, they're terrifying if they go wrong, which is, I guess, why we're talking about that today, right?
Yeah. So we're gonna look at what is it that makes them work, right? Like why do we even want to entertain the possibility of having a giant nuclear bomb in your backyard? Because that's where the technology came from. It came from the idea of splitting atoms, and when you split certain atoms of a certain size, then they split in half, and then they find two other atoms, and then they split those in half, and then now you've got this cascading effect of a lot of atoms releasing a lot of energy all at once. And so when we detonated a nuclear bomb, the idea was that we're just going to split everything in a millisecond. And so the biggest byproduct is heat or radiation, but most of it's in the form of heat, because all heat is radiation, right? It's basically one atom bumping into another atom or causing a bunch of atoms to get really, really excited and vibrate. And that's really all temperature is just how excited are these atoms. And so there's I gotta imagine there's a lot of confusion here in terms of what's different between a nuclear power plant and a nuclear bomb. Really, the biggest difference between the two is a nuclear bomb, you're trying to split these uranium atoms, not uranium, they use plutonium. The nuclear power plants, they use enriched uranium, whereas plutonium is a bit more unstable. So you're trying to split all these atoms as fast as possible to release all this heat in the form of radiation. A nuclear power plant does the same exact thing, but it slows it way down, right? We're not, that's the problem, is if we split everything at once, you technically have a nuclear bomb, but the idea is to slow it way down so that all we're doing is creating a predictable, controllable amount of heat. And so what could possibly go wrong?
A lot. Just for all those listeners who know very little about this subject, I'm right there with you. I know nothing about this subject, so I'm just going to be a really good listener and try to ask lots of questions and talk about how atoms vibe. They're vibing until they get hot. Vibing.
So
I had to use it.
Yeah, that's actually good. Yeah, it's like a Pee Wee Herman word of the day kind of a thing. So yeah, to the younger listeners out there, you have no idea who Pee Wee Herman or Pee Wee Herman. You know who I'm talking about. Pee Wee Herman. There we go. You have no idea who I'm talking about, and if you don't know, you're going to be just fine. You're probably better off.
You don't need it.
Yeah, no, you don't need to know what that guy was about. So that could be another episode unto itself. So basically, when we look at any power plant, when we're burning coal, we're burning oil, we're burning gasoline, we're burning wood. All we're trying to do is heat up basins of water to turn it into steam. Like one drop of water if you were to turn it into steam, it expands like 1,000 times fold. Like, it is very, very dense. Water is one of the densest things on Earth. And so when you take water and you convert it into steam, it now releases a lot of expanding energy. And that expanding energy can be directed through pipes and tubes and whatnot. You can blast that into turbines. So imagine a propeller on a plane, but instead of them kind of being pitched at a certain angle, they're like perpendicular. So they're designed to catch all that steam energy, and it starts spinning these giant turbines. Well, those turbines are then connected to generators, and those generators is where we get our electricity from. So
is that
yeah.
how they made like steam engines and boats and trains back in the 1800s? Is that how that works, or is that a different process?
No, it's actually very similar. In fact, it's interesting how we are using the concept of a steam engine to turn turbines. So instead of having steam pushing a piston, which would then you push a piston, and then that piston would then rotate a wheel on a train, and then that piston would then, as the wheel would turn, that arm you probably seen it like in Back to the Future. You see that train where it has those arms on the side of the wheels, and yeah. So that's the motion of those, and I'm sure there's train fanatics out there that are like, it's called this part, you idiot. But those arms are connected to pistons that they blast steam into it. And so like whenever you see a steam train come to a stop, it just releases all the steam out of that stack. It's actually not smoke, it's steam, because they have to slow the train down, and instead of running the steam through the pistons, they run it through the smokes or the exhaust stack on the top, and then that kind of gets rid of the energy. It works in a very similar way for any power plant. The process of getting the steam to the turbine is the easy part, right? That's simple. The issue is, how do you make the steam? And that is where the pollution comes from. That's where you're always going to have a byproduct, right? Because in science, you can't just create or destroy energy. You've got to convert one thing over to another thing. You can't just snap a finger and say, boom, I've got all the steam on my hands. It can't work like that. So when we're talking about coal plants and oil plants, and coal is still, I think it's still the most abundant form of electricity generation. My wife's works in industrial hygienics, and I think when she was studying her master's degree, she mentioned something like how most of the world still uses coal. In a lot of respects, the byproducts, that whenever you are burning a solid like that, you are going to release a ton of other byproducts. And we're not talking about greenhouse gases alone, like CO2 and carbon monoxide and all that. You're releasing a lot of other compounds that are cancer causing. And this is the reason why they want to put, these coal plants out in the middle of nowhere, because even though those smokestacks, they have scrubbers on them, like they actually have technology that pulls out a lot of the bad stuff, you can't get it all. And winds can blow this stuff all over the place, and you can still end up with, well, like if you look at a perfect example is after World War II, England would build a lot of smaller coal power plants in London. As the population kind of came back, those coal plants are just running at full bore, and there were times where the whole city had to shut down because it was just black soot and smoke everywhere.
Yikes.
Yeah, and that is way harmful. That is unbelievably harmful to your lungs, to pregnant women. That all that stuff turns into what's known as teratogens. So basically toxins that go straight to the fetus. It's a bad deal. So,
sounds terrible.
Oh yeah, it's it is terrible. But the problem is that coal, one, is abundant. 2, it does burn for a long time. And 3, it's cheap. And so we kind of run into this issue of like, well, how is it that we can create power without creating all this this outwardly awful stuff. That's where nuclear power comes from. So one interesting aspect with nuclear power is, well, actually, let's take a step back. Let's look at the sun. Okay, our sun has a ball of hydrogen. It's about the size of Texas. This ball of hydrogen weighs like trillions of tons. The entire gravitational pull of the entire sun has condensed like a nebula's worth of hydrogen into a ball about the size of Texas. And that is where all that energy comes from. The energy that fuels the solar system is coming from that core. And what it's doing is that it's taking a lot of gravity and it's compressing these hydrogen atoms into forming helium and then lithium. And that's where we get our elements from. Okay. It goes all the way up to iron. And then from there it stops. And then we, that's a whole nother concept into itself. But
yeah,
when we're doing that, when we compress two hydrogen atoms to make a helium atom, it releases a lot of heat. It releases a lot of energy. What we do here on Earth, because the relationship with the sun and the hydrogen and the gravity, is that the reason why the sun is the size it is, the color it is, the shape it is, releases the amount of heat it does, it's all because of a balance between the energy being released from the fusion in the core and the gravity. It's a balancing act. And that's what we're trying to imitate here on Earth. On Earth, what we don't quite have the technology yet. We're still working on it. There is a thing called cold fusion, where we use like plasmids and super powerful magnets. And there actually has been some achievements into trying to create nuclear fusion, but we're not there yet. So what do we do then? Let's try nuclear fission. And fission means to split apart. And so what we're doing is, instead of taking atoms to make, fuse them together to make bigger atoms, we're going to take already huge atoms like uranium, right? Where there's, what is that, like uranium-234, meaning that there's 234 protons in the middle of that atom. Hydrogen has 1 proton. Helium has 2 protons. Okay. Right? So what's happening is we're going to take something really, really big like uranium, and we're going to split that up. So now you've got 2 nucleuses of 100 plus. I mean, I can't do the math in my head because, math. You're now taking 2, instead of 1 big atom, you now have 2 big atoms, just half the size of the original one. They fly out. They find another uranium atom, and they split that in half. Okay. And then all those halves go find more uranium atoms, and they split all those in half. And all you're doing is you're basically taking uranium-234 and you're chopping into half, releasing a ton of heat. And then those 2 halves chop in half, releasing a ton of heat. And it causes this chain reaction. Simple, right?
Yeah, you're just literally splitting atoms in half. That's all I got.
Yeah. Well, and the idea is this. The idea is that when you can have one atom split another atom into 2, and then the remnants of that will fly out and then find more atoms, and then more and more and more, and it escalates. It expands. It becomes almost self-sustaining.
Sounds like a Hydra. Cut off a head and 2 more pop up.
Yeah, no, that's a good way of looking at it. And I guess you really could, at the subatomic level, you could think of it as like a nuclear fission reaction as like a Hydra, because the more you split, the more heat that you generate.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
And then
okay, I like that metaphor. I like it.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So yeah, we release that heat. Well, that heat, that transfers into the water. So the way nuclear power plants work is basically you have rods. You have your rods made out of uranium pellets. They're like in a cage. and they sink him down into this giant vat of water. And there's hundreds of these rods. Each one of these rods, I would say, depending on the size of the power plant, each one of the rods is probably about the diameter of your index finger.
Okay.
And they usually are 20, 30 feet in length. So they're pretty long. And what you do is you insert all these rods of uranium they're like held into these cages. And then you basically have like kind of like a coliseum of these pillars of uranium. And then how do you start the reaction? Well, ironically enough, you dump a ton of electricity into it. So you can actually go on YouTube and you can see these. You could type in like nuclear reactor starting, and it's really weird because you hear you can hear like electricity in the background, and they can hear this loud pop as they just dump all this electricity in there, and then you see this blue glow coming out, and that's the uranium fissioning itself. That's the uranium atoms bouncing or colliding in with other uranium atoms and making more splits and more splits and more splits, and it releases so much heat and so much of this radiation. That's where you get that blue glow from, like kind of like Dr. Manhattan for those of you who are Watchmen. You get that blue glow.
I was thinking about Electro from Spider-Man.
Oh,
but we're on the same wavelength, yeah.
yeah, no, it's Electro was more. Was he more? He was more yellowish, wasn't he?
Yeah, but I think about the third Spider-Man. I think it was the third one. He was blue.
Oh, okay.
Blue.
I'm old. I'm more of a Watchman kind of a guy. So yeah, like you could see this blue glow. That's the reaction starting. So cool, right? You're now releasing a ton of heat. The water starts boiling, starts turning into steam. Okay, great. There's one little problem though. It's a runaway chain reaction. How do you stop it?
Fair.
Like you just can't let it go exponentially, right? 1 to 2 to 4 to 8 to 16 to 32 to 64, 128.
Yeah, how do you control the heat?
Yeah, okay, yeah, there you go. How do you control the heat and how do you control the reaction? So, Believe it or not, this is where the balancing act comes into play. In these reactors, they have these rods. They're called control rods. The control rods are made out of like super exotic metals and all that stuff. But what they do is they slow the reaction down, right? Because what's happening is that you have a really, really angry uranium atom who just got split in half, and he's like furious that he just got split in half. So they're flying out to other rods nearby. They're splitting those atoms up, and then they all get angry, and then they start splitting off and going to other rods, and it's like a giant nuclear argument. And it's almost like a scene from a bar, right? Two dudes get into a fight, and then 5 minutes later, the whole bar is in a fight.
It gives me a lot of anxiety.
And it can get to the point where those rods can get so hot that it will want the water to turn to steam, but it can flash it, meaning it can take all that water and just vaporize the whole vat. And then now we are talking about a reaction that is, about 3,000 to 4,000 degrees. What will eventually happen in a very short period of time is all those that uranium will start melting, and then it hits the bottom of its containment housing, but there's nothing to stop the reaction, so it just gets hotter and hotter and hotter, and then it starts melting through all the barriers. Like it can burn through concrete as though it was wood.
Is that what happened at Chernobyl? Because all the things that you're talking about, that's what they explained in the show, and that's what I remember.
Yeah. So that's probably the most famous case of things going wrong.
Right.
And with Chernobyl, and it's good you bring that up because, like, I don't know if you watched the HBO series, it does a really, really good job kind of showing, like, what the radiation does to people. They kind of did a really good job explaining, especially at the end, like, what happened.
Yeah. It's terrifying.
And essentially what happened with Chernobyl, you got these control rods, they slow the reaction down, and it's a balancing act. You raise and lower them to maintain a consistent flow of fission. And because that fission being, all in that water, it turns that water, like it gets it hot, but it doesn't get it to the point where it just instantly vaporizes. It gets it to the point where the steam can kind of collect in the top, and then it will be pushed through these tubes and these pipes, and then it goes to turbines, turns to turbines, and then as it leaves the turbines, it cools down, and then it goes back into the reactor. That's actually one of the ways you can keep a reactor at a consistent temperature. The very thing, this is the beautiful part about it, the very thing that you are using to turn into steam, to turn turbines, is the same exact thing that cools the reaction down and helps maintain it.
Okay.
So that's one thing you can do to maintain the amount of, or to kind of contain the heat, so to speak, because water is a really good conductor of heat. These control rods, they keep the reaction from running away, right? The particles, the split up uranium atoms, they hit these rods and they don't know where to go, and so they just kind of stop.
Okay.
And so yeah, you can control them. In the event, a lot of nuclear reactors, in the event that you can, let's say the reaction starts to run away, you push a button and all the control rods drop. And what that's supposed to do, basically stall the reactor. It basically shuts down everything. The uranium rods can't do any more because they can't send out their neutrons or particles all over the place, and it stalls the reactor.
It's like your e-brake.
Yeah. Now, in the case of Chernobyl, this is where I think this is where the discussion can really be had. Like, who is at fault for this? Because the people in that control room had no idea that there were very specific mistakes that were made or costs that were cut.
Mm-hmm.
Those control rods are made out of a very fancy type of alloy, but to keep the cost down, they put the tips of these control rods, they were made of carbon. And that carbon is really famous. That's what was sitting all over the ground when that reactor exploded. But when they dropped them, when they saw that the reaction was running away from them, they hit the AZ5 button and it dropped the rods in there, the control rods. But the carbon would actually accelerate the reaction just for a brief second while they were coming down. And in the process of doing that, it caused basically all the rods to go completely haywire, and it just vaporized everything. That lid that they cap it off with, that lid weighed like 20,000 pounds. And the energy was so massive that it just blew that lid just right up into the air.
Like a cartoon?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That's horrifying.
Yeah. There was one dude in there that saw that. And it just blows that off. And now you have an exposed core. That exposed core, there's no water to contain it. There's no water to keep the core cool. So what happens then? You get tons of oxygen just being sucked into it. You mix oxygen with a lot of the hydrogen that was a byproduct inside of there, a whole bunch of uranium rods that are just glowing white hot. They're like thousands of degrees.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Kablooey.
Yeah. Big kablooey.
So that's why there was a lot of reports that there was 2 explosions. The first explosion was that containment lid that weighed 20,000 pounds is being popped off as though it was like a soda bottle.
Right.
And then shortly after, then there was a second explosion that just blew up the whole reactor 4, and it sent carbon. I mean, these chunks of carbon were glowing red hot, and they were just basically embedded with uranium and all sorts of highly radioactive compounds that just went everywhere. And I think I thought I saw one documentary where there was a grand total of 8,000 pounds of radioactive dust that just blew out of the top of that thing.
Oh, that's a catastrophic failure. That's not even a dumpster fire. That's like a radioactive, explosive, just
It's a landfill fire.
yeah. That's the word.
Yeah. And so it's just insane how like the town of Pripyat, the firemen showed up and they were never trained in what to do.
Of
They
course
they
not.
yeah, we're talking, the height of the Soviet Union here, where you were only on a need to know basis.
Yeah, how could they be prepared for that? There's no way.
Yeah. Yeah, like they showed up, and if you watch the HBO series, I think they did a really good job with the opening scenes. Like they showed up, they were immediately falling susceptible to radiation poisoning.
Yeah, and like if I don't know how true this is. Just the historian in me wants to question it, but one of the lines in the show was something along the lines of like, "Oh, it's probably just a house fire. Or somebody's asphalt on their roof is probably on fire. Don't worry, I'll be right back." And then he goes and yeah,
I think a lot of them had that mindset because the way that the propaganda worked is that this was a RBMK reactor. So they used an RBMK reactor, that was touted that they could never explode. And this was a mystery to everybody. So like when the firemen went there, they're like, oh yeah, these RBMK reactors, they don't explode. Like it's not a big deal. They're really safe. And the fire that they were seeing was fire.
right.
And so, yeah, if I was one of those firemen and I was completely in the dark about it, I would have just thought the same thing. I'm like, oh, yeah, no, it's just, another fire at the Sovietsky's house or something like that. That's probably going to be offensive, but that's all right. So they show up, these firemen, the first thing they noticed, and those that survived long enough to actually kind of give a testimony of what happened, the first thing they said was that they could taste something metallic in their mouth. They're like, they're all of them that could talk after this event. They were like, yeah, we would taste like something like pennies or something metallic-y in their mouth. And they had no idea that was actually the ionizing radiation that was just spilling out of this reactor. That giant chunks of carbon, stuff like, the size of bricks were just laying everywhere, still glowing. And keep in mind, they were glowing not just because they were hot, but they were glowing because they still had uranium that was still in a fissioning state, like still releasing energy embedded into it. And so like they would pick this stuff up, it would burn their hand, but some of them testified that like they could feel it burning on the opposite side, like the back of their hand. And yeah, that's ionizing radiation. That's the worst type of radiation that a human being can be exposed to.
So I know that nobody can see me right now, but I am like physically cringing. Like just the amount of like pain and sickness, not even just that at that particular moment, but after the fact. There are parts of Chernobyl where you can't even go through today because the radiation is still so high.
Yeah, they it took them months to get that whole thing kind of contained. They filled what they could with concrete. It was like a lead based concrete, if I remember correctly. And so yeah, that was what became known as the sarcophagus. But the reaction is still going to this day, and it will be going for hundreds of years. Like that whole area is unlivable to human beings. Now they've actually created a new one. I think it was a couple of years ago. They engineered the largest movable object ever, and it's basically this gigantic metal shield that they built off to the side of reactor number 4, and then they rolled that so like it's got contours that fit the reactor 4 architecture perfectly. and that's what they're using to contain it. But that is only good for 100 years. After that, they've got to come up with something else.
Lovely.
Yeah, and they've got to and this is the reason why nuclear power plants are so hated. In a large part has to do with how radiation affects the body.
Right.
You may not know it, but the Earth's mantle has nuclear, metals in it. It has uranium in it. It has our ground is emitting radiation as we speak. That's why when you turn on one of those Geiger counters, it's always making some sort of a sound. That's because it's picking up radiation that's coming from our mantle.
Okay.
Thankfully, our bodies can handle it. So,
Yeah.
like, what's the big deal then? What is it about a super angry subatomic particle that messes you up? Right.
Well, you know what they say. Too much is too much. I don't think they say that, but
well,
I say that.
I mean, it does make sense. Too much of anything.
Too much. Yeah, that's what it is. Too much of anything is gonna mess you up, no matter what it is. Even water. Yeah.
Well, what was that study that I remember? I remember when I was a little kid. They were talking about NutraSweet, like an artificial sweetener, and how toxic it was. And I remember listening to the news back when I had like one channel that I could get the rabbit ears to work on. They said that scientists injected a rat with 700 pounds of NutraSweet, and they noticed that it died.
That's...
Yeah.
I don't like that.
How do you inject 700 pounds of NutraSweet into an animal the size of a tennis ball?
That does... No. I hate all of that and all of that it comes with.
Yeah, that's some fine science right there. But radiation poisoning is something else. What happens when you're dealing with ionizing radiation is that these are particles that are really, really angry. They're moving really, really fast. It turns out that you're made of particles too. You're made of atoms like your DNA. And what happens is that you've got these other atoms that are, they're radioactive, meaning that they're moving at a really, really high velocity, and they rip right through you. They rip right through your DNA. Now, your body has mechanisms like, hey, the DNA in this cell isn't working right. We're just going to kill the cell. Like your body's doing that all day long. It is killing tens of thousands of cells because there's something not right with it. That mechanism works great, but if you damage so many of these cells, eventually what will happen is that DNA will tear and then maybe reconnect. Now you have a gene that's not working right. And then that gene will foster something inside of that cell, and that cell will not be working right, but not enough to the point where the body can detect it to get rid of it, but bad enough so that it starts multiplying like cells do, mitosis. And then now you have cancer. And that's just the long-term effects. Like what these guys were experiencing, these firemen, they actually had acute radiation poisoning. And there's 4 stages to it. It's kind of graphic. The show did a really good job of showing like the different stages of it. One thing they got horribly wrong is that the men were not radioactive themselves.
Got it.
The clothing that they had, that's radioactive. They left that in that Pripyat hospital, when they shipped them out to Moscow. Like they left all that clothing there. But yeah, the men there were not themselves radioactive. They could have had radioactive dust on them and stuff like that, but they washed all that off. But it's really weird how radiation kills you. Especially
inside out, or?
Well, yeah, sort of. Like the first thing it does is it will destroy a lot of the cells in your abdominal area. The body can repair that. So the first symptoms, you're gonna imagine like having a really bad stomach flu followed by with like a really bad sunburn. Yeah, you're gonna have diarrhea, vomiting, anorexia, lack of appetite. And that can happen mere hours after the exposure to a couple of days. So that's called the prodromal stage. The second stage is called the latent stage. Your body starts fixing itself, right? The sunburn starts to go away. You start getting your appetite back. You start like you start feeling better. You're like, all right, cool, I got over it. I survived this. And this can last for for a few weeks. And then the manifest illness stage. Here's what really happened. You're exposed to that much radiation. What happens is that your bone marrow is killed. Now, you can live without bone marrow for quite some time. The issue is that your bone marrow produces white blood cells, red blood cells, platelets. It produces the things that are constantly dying in your body that needs to be replaced. It's like you just said, it kind of starts from the inside out. Yeah, basically what happens is since the bone marrow is dead, your body can't fight infections. Your body can't replace dead blood cells. Your liver and your kidneys are constantly working on filtering your blood and getting all the dead stuff out. But eventually what will happen, since your body can't control the bacteria even in your stomach, you literally start decaying from the inside out.
It sounds terrible.
It's probably one of the worst ways to go. But yeah, this manifest illness stage, this is where you start seeing skin lesions. This is where you're bedridden. This is where your eyes become super sensitive to light. You don't want to move. You don't want to breathe, because everything you're doing it's like you're basically dealing with a rotting corpse from the inside out. That can take it, like these guys, I think they lasted a few days in that stage, which would have to be the worst few days of your life. But this can also last up to several months. And then the final stage is either you recover or you die.
50-50 shot.
Yeah. And you can do a bone marrow transplant, which may help. But again, that's a 50-50 shot. And this is the reason why nuclear reactors are like the epitome of dumpster fires, is because we don't have these issues with coal plants. We don't have these issues with oil or gas or burning wood, for that matter.
Solar.
Solar. Yeah, you don't have that issue with solar. That could be another topic of discussion.
Could be,
because solar is great and all, but the amount of power to generate what we need is, given the efficiency of our solar panels, I mean, these things are operating like at 8-10% efficiency. So
that, let alone all the corporatization that's come along with it.
Yeah. Well, and the corporatization, I want to bounce back to the power plant or the nuclear stuff here, is governments get involved. And in this case, the Soviet Union did everything in their power to just play it off like it's not a big deal.
Did they try to hide it too?
Yeah.
Or like the how extreme it was?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, the way that they would do it is they had faulty sensors. Like they would have sensors that only go up to a certain stage, 3.5 Roentgen. It's not great, but not terrible. But then people are like, well, but that's all the sensor goes up to, right? They're called dosimeters. Then they eventually found a dosimeter. They found two of them at Chernobyl. They turned one on, and it died. And they're like, okay, that's a faulty dosimeter. What did it die at? And it's like it died at like 1200 Roentgen. Okay, what did the second dosimeter say? Same thing. We turned it on, and immediately died at 1200 Roentgen.
Maxed out. Yeah,
maxed out and exploded kind of thing. It's just like, like Wile E. Coyote got a really bad Acme dosimeter, and, there it didn't work. So that's what they did. They took that information. They're like, oh yeah, it's nothing more than receiving a bunch of chest X-rays in a day. They tried to really play it down, and so like the show, the Chernobyl show on HBO. I think that was really the emphasis behind that show. I think that's what they really wanted to focus on, was how the KGB was working, how the Russians really tried to cover it up, how
the government handled it.
Yeah. And how you had some really, really inexperienced people, right? I mean, like like one guy, I mean, he was like, what was he, like 22 years old? Like, what are you doing in charge of this portion of a reactor? You're just a kid. In America, if you're in one of those positions, you have like at least a master's degree plus internships plus engineering background. Like, you are obviously in America, we feel a lot better when we have overqualified people in those types of positions, which is the reason why when we have a nuclear issue, it's not as bad.
Right.
And yes, we did have our own meltdown. 3 Mile Island in 1979.
What happened
Literally
there?
with that, it was a partial meltdown. And what literally happened is the reactor was producing too much steam, right? That's the steam is what's known as a positive void coefficient, meaning the steam can't handle, it can't move heat away from the rods. So what was happening is the steam was coming to the top like it's supposed to be doing, but there's a check valve on the top of the reactor core, and that check valve is supposed to open up when the pressures get too high to vent the steam, so then they can force more water in to cool it down.
Well, like a boiler.
Yeah, like a giant nuclear teapot.
Exactly.
Or a pressure cooker.
Yeah.
So
I like the teapot.
Yeah, a really, really creepy, scary, terrifying teapot. And so, like, what happened with 3 Mile Island is we, as in, like, the Americans or the technicians, they tried to force water into it, hoping that it would then, the steam would release at the top and it would cool the reactor down. Well, that whole mechanism was defective. So they were forcing water into it, and then it was literally just turning into steam. They kept forcing more and more water in there, and it would just turn into steam, and the reactor ran away. Now, it was a partial meltdown, meaning that the uranium rods melted and hit the bottom of the reactor chamber, but it stayed there. It didn't burn through multiple layers like it did on Chernobyl. It stayed there because they eventually, once they kind of figured out, oh crap, this check valve isn't working, they were just turning on generators and just pushing all this water they could in there, but the steam was mixing with the water, and it was causing all the pumps to vibrate, and it, like, nothing was working right. But they eventually got it cooled down, and so they did a cold shutdown. How long do you think it took them to shut that reactor down?
15 minutes.
It actually took about 3 to 4 months.
Dang. I was way off.
Yeah.
I pulled that out of my butt.
Yeah, well, 15 minutes out of your butt is probably a lot more comfortable than 3 to 4 months. But yeah, no, like 3 Mile Island, once they got it cooled down, it took months to get it down. And now this is literally what they mean by cool down, is that the water was less than 100 degrees centigrade, meaning the water just stopped boiling, and that was cool. Like they can work with that.
Okay.
And so, yeah, they did a lot of investigations and stuff like that, and basically, kind of like the Russians, it was during the construction, the reactor the construction of the reactor was running behind schedule. Workers didn't want to lose their jobs. They kind of falsified records. They kind of cut corners, and it's something as simple as like a check valve almost blew up, 3 Mile Island.
Yeah.
And so, but I mean, I think that when we look at it in terms of transparency, I feel like the 3 Mile Island incident doesn't get the attention. It doesn't get the exposure that Chernobyl did. Probably because it didn't result in people dying. It didn't result in a massive exodus of everybody living in that area.
Yeah, it'll do it. I mean...
Yeah, I mean...
yeah.
Well, and it's like... And I feel like there was probably a lot of exposure in 1979, but then in 1986, when Chernobyl went up, America went to the Soviet Union and to, like, their media, and they're like, tag, you're it. Suddenly, the 3 Mile Island thing... Well, what 3 Mile Island thing? Like, look at Chernobyl. That's a bad deal over there. Don't look at our issues. Look at them.
Blame game. Hot potato.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah. Yep. With radioactive potatoes.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I think that's probably the reason why nuclear reactors get such a bad rap. Maybe it's because when they go wrong, it is truly catastrophic. it's one thing to see somebody get burned in a coal power plant, which is very, very rare. But it's a different thing to see these firemen, what they went through and how that got documented. And it's horrific. I guess the $1 million question is this: what other options do we have?
Right.
I
if
mean,
we want to go green, like we need to.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we go green, but it's just like,
How?
Yeah.
No, that's a hard question. Not one that I can answer in an hour. Especially considering I'm, like I said, I'm more of a historian than a scientist, but I still try. Yeah, I don't know, man.
Yeah, and this is where we get a lot of. I think this is where the pushback towards innovation gets criticized. I go on Facebook and I see people. I see those memes on there where like, hey, the guy's driving his electric car, like, hey, I've gone green, and then like there's this coal power plant billowing smoke out in the background, and is that true? To a small extent. Now, to give you an idea of how efficient nuclear reactors are, basically 1 gram of that uranium in comparison to say like 1 gram of coal, that 1 gram of uranium will produce 8,000 times more heat output in a controlled state, like not melting down. It will release 8,000 times more energy than the 1 gram of coal.
That's crazy.
So yeah, like nuclear power plants, man, if you can keep them under control, they're good, and they last a long time too. I mean, keep in mind, I think Chernobyl, the reactors were built in the early 70s, and reactor 4, yeah, that's not working, but the other 3 reactors are.
Yeah.
They're employed by full-time staff. Yeah, they monitor those other 3 reactors are still going to this day.
Yeah, like here's the thing. In my happy place, there is a world in which we could live where nuclear power is safe to use. And I feel like that's achievable as long as we learn from our dumpster fires.
Yeah.
The problem is the dumpster fires with nuclear reactors are scary.
Well, what really is the source of the dumpster fire? Is it the uranium itself? Is it how these plants are manufactured? Is it the amount of rules and regulations that we put into place?
The easy answer is human error.
Yeah, like we've got humans that are maybe underqualified. We've got governments that want to cover stuff up. So I guess really we could look at it in terms of, all right, nuclear power plants are dumpster fires in the making. But what is the trash that we put into that dumpster to make it burn?
I really like that question.
Like, okay, if a nuclear power plant is the dumpster itself, what garbage are we putting in to make it burn? Is it politics? Is it, covering information up? Is it inexperienced workers? Simple human error? I feel like if there's simple human error, like it's like a little pile of dog poop in the bottom of this empty trash can or this dumpster, it would burn for a little bit and then go away. I feel like, though, when we start throwing in all these politics and agencies and bureaucracies, and it's just like one bag of trash after another.
It's a lot of human error. Like just like the negative aspects of humanity getting involved with anything, really. You could say that with anything, but
yeah. Well, it's fascinating how we as humans we will weaponize something and then we will vilify it, and then we'll figure out a way to make it work for us. and so yeah, that's a very broad definition of nuclear power plants. How these things, like the mindset of this show is you engineer something out to perfection, you plan everything out, and then 5 minutes after execution, everything just blows up in your face. And in the case of Chernobyl, that is literally what happened. Everything went sideways in the course of minutes. And now it's going to take centuries to clean up. So,
However, there is, like I said, there is a world in which we can live where we can learn from it and utilize the positive aspects of it too.
yeah.
I think
Yeah.
someday, hopeful thinking, wishful thinking.
We'll get there. We came from being cavemen to where we're at now. I would assume that we'll be able to figure this out. But yeah, no, that's nuclear power plants in a nutshell.
What are a couple other meltdowns or potential meltdowns that happen? Just if listeners wanted to
Oh,
do
okay, yes.
further research on their own.
So obviously the big one is Chernobyl. 3 Mile Island is a good one to look into. Probably the most famous one of today, of like our era, would be the Fukushima. The Fukushima one, that's where the earthquake hit Japan, and then it got hit with not only one but two tsunamis. That is an absolutely fascinating look into really everything from the social aspect. Like if you look at Fukushima, it's almost the exact opposite of 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl. I mean, they really did engineer this power plant with multiple safeguards, and a lot of those safeguards did work. The question is that they even built this thing to withstand a tsunami, but they didn't build it to sustain two tsunamis.
It's fair. Maybe we can do an episode for that one particular incident.
Yeah, I was going to get into it in this show, but that is like an hour-long episode unto itself, because there's a lot to it, because there was multiple explosions. All the reactors went up. The cleanup process of that is monumental, because they're going through like tens of thousands of gallons of water that they can't do anything with. Like, they have to store it. Yeah, the Fukushima thing is very fascinating. It really looks into like, hey, we had everything in a best case scenario. We didn't cut corners, and yet it still got away from us. But it didn't get away from them to the point where they had to evacuate like half of Japan. Like,
that's true.
And so even to this day, it is an argument that people bring up against nuclear power plants is, hey, Fukushima, they did everything right, and it still went sideways. So I think that would be a really good one to visit down the road. And then we also got the the Zaporizhia power plant in Ukraine.
I give you props for reading that out loud, because I wasn't going to try.
Zaporizhia. I know I'm probably butchering it, but I had to listen to Google Translate say it over and over and over.
Yep.
And that's kind of the best pronunciation I can get with that. But I think Zaporizhia would be tying into an episode revolving around this war in Ukraine, and that's a hot mess into itself. Let me tell you, there's a lot going on that one.
There's a lot going on. Maybe we should hold out on that particular topic until it's not so hot.
Yeah, hopefully we don't visit nuclear bombs. But yeah, the idea of an entire city going up in a flash of light it's
terrifying.
It's terrifying, but I think that's kind of what you actually have coming up, isn't it?
Not as terrifying as nukes, but so I want to lighten it up a little bit, and as much as I can,
like literally light it up.
Light it up. I'm gonna light it up and visit Mrs. O'Leary's cow and see if she was the real culprit of starting the Great Chicago Fire.
Okay.
So that is the plan for next episode, and naturally, my first Google search for this topic was Mrs. O'Leary's cow.
Yeah, my whole family's from the Chicago area, so that's kind of like legend. It's lore in my family.
Is that your cow started the fire?
Maybe. Yeah, maybe we loaned Mrs. O'Leary that cow. Wouldn't surprise me.
We should get the rights to that song too, see if they'll let us play it.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I think that's going to be there's a lot of different theories on that. And I think really, as much as the Chicago burning down, it's equally amazing in how it got rebuilt. and how it made steel tycoons, how it really ushered in the way of these ultra wealthy billionaires like Carnegie and the like, Vanderbilt and whatnot, because that's how they had to rebuild a city, was with metal.
Yeah, we will for sure get into it, just because I think the event itself is fairly interesting, but what happened after is where the juicy stuff is. And yeah, no, I'm super excited to get into it and talk about what happened after, and that is literally a positive coming out of a dumpster fire. So
Yeah. All righty, cool. Well, yep, that wraps up this episode. You have a good night, and everybody out there, keep it a hot mess, okay?
thanks for listening.
Bye.